Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This is my final point on point today. Our guest this morning, Dr. Loretta Breuning. The book is entitled Rewiring Your Brain for Happiness, Tame Your Anxiety. And I'm going to tell you, the book is far deeper than its title. The book takes you into understanding how our brains become what they become, and that we are all just a product of what we saw. She calls it mirroring. What you saw your mother do and what she saw her mother do, or your father or whomever raised you, you become a product of that. And for the most part, if we feel like we had a good upbringing, we accept that and we honor that, and we should. But then there are some things that are shortcomings that happen for all of us. You know, the old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I think I used it even in the interview, where somebody will say, you're just like your mother, or you're just like your father. And it's not a good saying. It's something that could be negative and that could make you feel like, yeah, I am that, without even thinking about it. You're going to be just like your father, or you are just like your father, or you're going to be just like your mother, or you are. Well, here's what she talks about in the book. Those are things that happen that we mirror, but she submits that you can have more of what you want than what you have by creating new neural pathways. In other words, you're changing your mind. And where do you change your mind at? In your brain. If you can own to some degree that, yes, I'm doing that. And she talked about her mother. She talked about the fact that her mother felt ostracized. Therefore, she made her feel that she was going to be ostracized. And at the end of the conversation, we talked about her being in a classroom. And she was the only person of that race in the classroom. And her mother told her off the top, this group of people are not going to like you. She made a decision that she passed upon to her. And because we believe what our parents say to us, she believed that to be true. And so she spent her whole life, as we all do, with the ideology and the mindset of what had been bestowed upon her by her mother. But when she began to study the mind and study this whole concept, she realized where it came from, and she began to change it. And she began to create a new path of, I don't want to believe that everybody doesn't like me. I don't want to think that it's because they're jealous of me, or it's because I'm this, or because I'm that they don't like me. I want to create a new pathway. And you start to do it one thought at a time. But you have to begin to change the way that you approach people. And she said that was like her saving grace. And that's how she began to change. Everything that we are, we have to go back to the genesis, the beginning of how we were raised, and the lessons and the conversations that were had in our home. And she talked about her mother being very dismissive of her. And so she went into a shell. And she talked about how not only was her mother dismissive, but her mother would rant a lot. In other words, in just normal terminology, she would fuss all the time, probably, is what she was really saying. And so she would retreat into books, into homework, into study, into reading. And so she became, of course, a Ph.D. that has studied this subject in order to help us to begin to identify the neural pathways that have been created for all of us, and to help us to get past the fear, to get past anxiety. She says those things are natural. They come from, and when she talks about the mammalian brain, she talks about the brain of animals. And she uses the analogy and the parallel of animals to humans. And our brains are much bigger, much smarter. And the way that we internalize is much deeper. And as the human brain has learned to anticipate what will happen before it happens. And that's why so many of us live in anxiety. And I can give you a good example. I hate the word no. And I don't want to hear it. I've hated it since I was a child. And a lot of that goes back to my dad said no to me a lot. And so as I grew up and then became an adult, I hated it. I hate to hear somebody say no to me. I take no as a rejection of me, not of the thing, but as a rejection of my humanity and my person. And she talked about how we get that early on, but how we can begin to change that. And that's why the book was so deep for me and so important. And I use myself, not because I'm talking about myself. That's the best barometer that I have, that I can really hopefully explain it to the listeners and the viewers so that you can get a better understanding. You know, every book that I read, I try to read it not just with my physical eyes, I try to read it with my spiritual eyes, and I try to present it to you in a way that makes you say, do I deal with that? Could I change that? And if I change that, would it make my life better? And that's how I read. I read so that we can all really take a deeper look at ourselves so that we can change and get better. Is change easy? No. If it were, we would all be better. It's devastatingly hard, but it's possible. The book, once again, is Tame Your Anxiety. If you're interested in changing your mind, this is a book that you just got to pick up. It's easy to read, it's not that long, and it's helpful. This has been my final point on Point today. Stay with us. We're back to wrap up after this.